Now we're waiting to join a live program, and as soon as we do, of course, you will see it. But first, tonight, before that, the US Supreme Court has dealt a severe blow to President Trump's global tariff policy. In a 6-3 ruling, the court said that he had exceeded his powers. The justices struck down his application of a law that he employed to raise tariffs on dozens of countries. It's estimated that the import taxes boosted Treasury coffers by at least $175 billion. The tariffs are also a central pillar of not just Mr. Trump's economic policy, but his foreign policy and his outlook on the world. The European Union says it's carefully analyzing the Supreme Court ruling and is in close contact with Washington for clarity on what steps it now intends to take. An EU spokesman said businesses on both sides of the Atlantic depended on predictable trading relations. Canada said the ruling reinforced its view that the tariffs affecting it are unjustified. Well, we'll get more clarity on all that in a moment when we cross live to speak to Arise special correspondent James Blue in New York. But before that, President Trump has delivered his latest ultimatum to Iran. It came during a meeting of the Board of Peace, the Middle East coalition Mr. Trump formed to stabilize a region analysts say he could soon plunge into a new war. They say it's ironic that he's simultaneously calling for peace and threatening military action, and that underscored the competing impulses at the heart of Mr. Trump's foreign policy in his second term. They say it's clear that the impasse between Washington and Tehran, a standoff that has quickly escalated, could now lead to the largest US air campaign in years. However, Mr. Trump has said he prefers a diplomatic solution in the form of a deal that ends Iran's nuclear weapons program. Well, for more of these developments, Arise special correspondent James Blue joins me now on the line from Baltimore. James, thanks very much indeed for joining us. What's been the reaction to this Supreme Court ruling from the Trump administration? I understand that they anticipated the ruling.
Yeah, they did anticipate the ruling, and really glad to be here with you in Baltimore. Basically, they are prepared to use other means to get the funds that they say we need and that they say are owed to the country. But I think, Charles, it's very difficult because what has happened, and you see senators and congressmen and even former Vice President Mike Pence basically applauding the separation of powers. In the US, you have the Congress, who basically gives the money. You have the president, who executes, and you have the Supreme Court, which sort of officiates. And what's happened in this ruling, the Supreme Court basically suggested that the president overstepped, and his desire to sort of regulate funds in this way was against the Constitution, and they struck down his ruling. And so this is a really kind of, I think people from all political sides are quite impressed with the way the Supreme Court has really upheld the separation of powers.
And James, as you and all the reporters and all the sort of court experts analyze this Supreme Court ruling and what it's going to mean for President Trump's leverage over the world, how big a blow would you say it is for Mr. Trump?
It's a very significant blow, Charles, because he was using these tariffs as a bludgeon, as a way to get countries to do exactly what he wanted. Now that that power is not there, they're going to have to go back and try different means to do it. It's not to say that they can't do it, but it's just that the path that they chose initially just has not proven successful. So, in the short run, what this means is that the billions of dollars that have been collected now has to be refunded. And I know, just speaking through to friends just in the last hours or so, law firms are being hired by foreign governments to go to the US Treasury to get this money back. What the administration is going to do, they're going to look at the various laws and try to figure out where they can squeeze tariffs of their choosing into the fiscal system. I think you're going to see a lot of emphasis on national security. The US president can impose tariffs where there is a national security concern related to the import of certain items. Whether they will consider that to be for specific sectors or whether they'll consider that for specific countries, I'm not sure, but I believe that's where they're going to head.
But of course, what this means is that that Liberation Day blanket tariff that was imposed across the world appears to have been struck down. Can we, based on that, now say that a large part of Mr. Trump's economic policy has been ruled upon and people can now move on?
Well, I think it certainly has been ruled upon, but I don't think people can move on. Charles, as you know, the State of the Union address is next week, and President Trump is certainly facing an affordability crisis here in the US. Now, with this sort of rejection of his tariffs, he is going to have a really hard story to tell because in his telling, the tariffs were going to help make things much more affordable. They did not. They raised prices. And so, I don't think it is done because the president is so singularly interested in tariffs as a way to generate revenue. As you know, Charles, tariffs are really paid by the end users. Tariffs have been largely paid by increased prices by the American public. And so now we have to take monies that were collected and give it back to the countries who paid it. So it's a very, very complicated, messy system. But because President Trump is the person that he is, I don't see him forfeiting those tariffs anytime soon. In fact, his trade representative said they're only going to find other ways to get exactly what they want.
In the meantime, though, I understand that the markets have been reacting positively to this news, and businesses, at least some of them, now have some clarity, or at least a measure of it.
I think they have a measure of clarity for the short period, and the markets have not overreacted to the rejection of Trump's tariffs. I think there is sort of market relief that the sort of instability of the sort of 25% tariff today, 15% tomorrow, maybe 10% next week. I think that sort of cascade of different tariffs based on the president's whim, that has gone away. And so I think there is some stability in that so that businesses and trading partners know what they're going to be paying in the short term. But I think that's a short-term relief.
Let me just say, James, that we're getting news that Donald Trump will hold a press briefing on the Supreme Court decision to strike down his tariff agenda at 12:45 Eastern Time. That's, I believe, your time in America. And here in the UK, I mean, in Nigeria, I'm not in the UK, I'm in Abuja, it'll be 17:45 GMT. Which will be 18:45 Nigerian time. That's 6:45. So if we get it before the other live that we're expecting takes over, we will, of course, cross live and listen to what Mr. Trump has to say. But back to you, James. Is there a way for President Trump, I know you've mentioned this, but just for clarity and for the sake of a lot of our viewers who are not American and who are mystified by the way things are done in the US, is there a way for President Trump to look at this ruling and then reimpose those tariffs in a different way, not using the law that the Supreme Court has just struck down? I know you talked about it before, but if you could sort of expand
Yeah,
on that.
no. It is confusing, Charles, and I'm happy to review it again because I did just mention it briefly. Basically, there are sections of the sort of trade policy that allow the President of the United States to specifically find ways to protect national security interests, find ways to protect U.S. businesses, find ways to kind of do very specific, very surgical sort of protections that would allow him to impose tariffs on very particular industries and countries. And so the question is whether they will try to do that on, let's say, all of India, or whether they would do it on the textile industry in India or on the plastic industry in India. And so there are ways that this can be done. Obviously, it's much more precise and it's much more specific because it is country by country. But I think the hope that they have is that they will be able to generate the same amount of revenue from those decisions and from those rulings as they have from these sort of blanket tariffs. I mean, this is a really good moment, actually, Charles. The systems of checks and balances is working. The president has been, sort of stopped by a Republican majority Supreme Court. The decision was 6-3. That's a very healthy rejection of his approach. And so, yes, they can certainly continue. There is space within the law, but it's much harder, it's much more specific, and it's not as instant as the tariffs that he was trying to do that's just been overturned.
Well, as I mentioned, Donald Trump is due to sort of address the media in about, I don't know, less than half an hour from now. But is it your sense, James, that Mr. Trump is unlikely to abandon his trade agenda? I mean, that Supreme Court tariff ruling today, as you said, dealt a major setback on one of his signature economic issues, but it doesn't mean Mr. Trump's trade agenda will suddenly disappear overnight.
Not at all, Charles. In fact, he's going to double down. He's going to condemn the Supreme Court. He's going to condemn the Republicans who've come out in support of the decision. He's going to condemn his former vice president who's come out in support of the decision. And he's really going to take it back to his base that the US government is screwing the little people who are having to pay everyday wages. This is another, and he's going to probably cast this as another example of that. And he's going to basically say, stay tuned because you didn't let us go this way, but we're going to find another way to get exactly what we want. Donald Trump is completely convinced that tariffs are the way to go. And given the fact that he has no desire to raise taxes here in this country, he's going to try to use tariffs, quote unquote, saying that we're taxing the countries that are cheating us anyway. This is core to the Trump kind of ideology, the Trump belief, and I think you'll see it on display quite vehemently in the press conference that's coming up in just about 15, 17 minutes, although I don't expect it to start on time.
Well, I mean, let's just drill down a bit further on that, James. I mean, is it all about taxes? Because I'm wondering why tariffs have been such a major part of President Trump's economic and foreign policy. I mean, is it also a lot about a flex of American power?
I think there is something about flex of American power. We have the world's largest market so far. Oh, actually, China may have the world's largest. Maybe we have the second largest market, and everyone wants to be here. I think China has the largest number of people, but I think the size of our market is larger in terms of dollars. But in terms of the policy, Charles, tariffs are easy because you don't have people in this country voting on tariffs. If you raise taxes, you have people in this country who have to vote on it. The tariffs are placed on foreign countries, and although they have interests here, foreign countries, by definition, don't get to vote here. And so for the Trump administration, this has been a politically sort of easy way to generate revenue. It does cost people because tariffs at the end of the day are a surcharge that consumers pay on any product that's imported. Trump has always said that, oh, yes, the person who is exporting is actually paying the tariff. But in most cases, that's not true. And so there's an ease to tariffs that the president has enjoyed. And that is why he's relied on them. And that's why they've been at the center of what he's trying to do. And yes, they have raised about $200 billion since they were started. And now that money has to be returned. And again, that's why the New York law firms have been very, very busy today trying to figure out exactly how to help these countries get their money back.
And James, of course, every time we have you on air, we try to take as much advantage as we can of your knowledge of these matters, because obviously you know a lot about these things, much more than we do. I'm wondering why precisely the Supreme Court made this ruling today against Donald Trump, because in the past, Congress and the courts, from what I'm reading, have given presidents leeway to impose tariffs on targeted goods or for brief periods of time. I mean, for example, President Nixon imposed a sweeping tariff on imports in 1971 to combat what he said was a currency crisis, but kept them in place for just 4 months. And in 2003, President George W. Bush imposed tariffs on steel imports and kept them in place for approximately 9 months.
Yeah, so I just want to go and find the very specific nature of the ruling of sort of what what the Supreme Court decided. Basically, the court basically said that the president did not have the ability to force the governments of other countries to pay these tariffs, and that it was the right of Congress to do that. And basically, they said that the president could not use emergency powers because that was not within the remit of that specific emergency power. And yes, you are right. The court has been very deferential to President Trump thus far. But I think, even this conservative Supreme Court is suggesting to President Trump and his administration that there are limits. There are places where they are unwilling to go, and this was one of them. I think if you look at the sort of major decisions that the court has made in terms of trying to decide whether something to support Trump, not to support Trump, they have more than not supported Trump. But they basically are saying the president exceeded his authority when imposing tariffs on every U.S. trading partner. The Constitution gives Congress the power to impose taxes. And Mr. Trump is the first president to declare that this emergency power, which was passed in 1977, also gave him power to set tariffs during an emergency. And so this is just really a big blow because it is they're going to have to unwind these trade deals. They're going to have to pay hefty refunds. And, it's really an indicator that their sort of fervent belief in President Trump to sort of be this sort of unitary executive, to do whatever he wants to do, to decide what he wants to decide. That's just not the case. And so it was very interesting, not only the three liberals, but Chief Justice Roberts, Amy Coney Barrett, and Justice Neil Gorsuch were all in favor of voting against President Trump. And again, as I say, this really kind of shows that the balance of power can and does work. And so for the Democrats, who are really concerned that President Trump was getting a free pass from the Supreme Court, this is a confirmation that they're not.
James, thank you very much indeed. We appreciate your assessments there. James Blue is a RISE special correspondent. He was talking to me on the line there from Baltimore.